Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's event, APAP ArtsForward Monthly Reopening Webinar. My name is Willie Santiago, and I'm the Manager of Programs and Resources at the Association of Performing Arts Professionals. I use he, they pronouns, and I am a fair-skinned Hispanic person with short brown wavy hair, brown eyes, and I'm wearing a light blue shirt. But to acknowledge that APAP is located in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., on the ancestral lands of the Piscataway, Anacostan, and Monkey people who have stewarded this land throughout the generations. I'd like to pay my respect to the elders, both past and present. Closed captioning will appear automatically on your screen. If you would like to disable the chat transcript, please click More on the bottom of the Zoom window and hide subtitle. We are joined by ASL interpreters from Purple, Hannah and Jesse. Thank you both for collaborating with us for today's webinar. Participants on today's webinar will have the opportunity to ask questions during portions of today's roundtable. At APAP, we follow staff procedure to monitor and determine speaking order for asking questions or raising discussion points. If you would like to speak or ask a question, please type staff in the chat, and an APAP staff member will be monitoring the chat during today's discussion, and you'll be called on in the order of which you appear in the chat. APAP is your go-to resource for the connections and resources you need to build your career as a performing arts professional in the presenting, booking, and touring field. Please join APAP as we continue to provide opportunities for community learning, commerce, and discovery. You can visit apap365.org/membership for more information, or if you have questions, you can email us at info@apap365.org. At APAP, we offer programming both year-round and at conference. We have some events that are upcoming within the month of October. The first one will be on October 6th. So we are second Welcome to the Field session. It is an introductory course into how the presenting, booking, and touring field operates. On October 13th, we'll have a Healing Forward intensive with our partners, Sozo. On October 20th, we will have a deep webinar, Building Equal and Equitable Partnerships. It's a webinar that will be centered on equitable contracting practices. On October 25th, we will have a youth and family programming networking event. And at the end of October on the 26th, we will have our SAMP affinity group that is small and mid-sized presenters. These events, some of them are free, some of them do require an APAP membership. The only events that will be free will be our second Welcome to the Field on October 6th and our deep webinar on October 20th. The other ones in October will require an APAP membership. So I would like to now turn things over to Krista Bradley, our Director of Programs and Resources.
Thanks, Willie. Hi, everybody. It's good to see you all. I am Krista Bradley. I am Director of Programs and Resources and work closely with Willie in the Programs Department to deliver all the things that he just went through to share and support. I use the pronoun she, her. I'm a Black, brown-skinned woman wearing a pink headband and a gray sweater. That's about all that you need to know about how I look. Today's session is part of our ArtsForward program initiative made possible with general support from the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation. APAP's ArtsForward program supports the presenting and touring field safe, vibrant, and equitable reopening and recovery as presenters, artists, and audiences reconnect, tours resume, and venues reopen. As part of ArtsForward, APAP launched this ArtsForward Reopening Survey back in February with our research partner, AMS Planning and Research. For the last 8 months, we have gathered invaluable longitudinal data from performing arts presenters, venues, agent managers, producers, and artists to track field-wide trends in reopening and resuming programming, booking, and touring activities. We want to thank everyone who has participated in this effort. We know survey fatigue is real, and so we appreciate the fact that you have stayed in there with us and been diligent about sharing your observations and being generous in being able to offer that to the field, because we know that data is real and can be powerful tools in decision making. This will be the second to last survey update. We'll be making a report that summarizes all the work that has happened thus far, and doing probably another session that just summarizes everything, as well as having a written report that we'll share with the field. And we are in discussions about doing One last update, maybe right before conference, so that we can get a better sense of just how everybody is doing in this fall as we come back and deal with the endemic and see how things are going this fall. Today, we'll be learning findings from the 7th deployment of the reopening survey, which was administered to presenters across the country. And as I say, that we'll be publishing findings and sharing more about the summary of what we've learned moving forward. I want to express our gratitude to the Mellon Foundation for their support and our appreciation and admiration for AMS Planning and Research and their team and partnership. We are joined today by Stephen Wolf, Principal of AMS Planning and Research, and I will turn this over to him. I will also say that rather than have a set panel today, we have a couple of folks that we have worked with and talked with over the last couple of months, and we've asked some of them to come back so that we can actually lean in and just get their perspective. And then we're going to open this up for discussion and tap your expertise, because I know that we've got a real diversity of insights and people on the call. So if I know you, I may be calling on you. So I'll turn it over to Stephen now.
Thanks very much, Krista. Thanks for the introduction and welcome to everybody who's joining us today. I'm Steve Wolf, as Krista mentioned, Principal of AMS Planning and Research. I am located in Fairfield, Connecticut, on the ancestral lands of the Quonnet and the Pecosset. We send our wishes and thanks to their elders past, present, and future. Again, as Krista mentioned, this is our 7th of 8 surveys that we're going to present today. I'm going to share some data with you. Hopefully, we do agree that there is data fatigue. Hopefully, there's not too much reporting fatigue. I am excited to say that we had just under 110 responses to this iteration of the survey, which is about 85% of the 140 odd that we've been having. So terrific for a summer survey. The other thing that I want to share with folks and encourage is to either put some questions, as Willie said, in the chat through the stack procedure, or follow up as Manuel and Thea help us prompt some areas of investigation. It's as important to hear what's happening on the ground as it is to share with you the data that we receive. So let me dive into the report, and we'll start with some information about activity and attendance. In 2019, before the pandemic, looking across a 12-month period, the average venue or presenter, the median one, if you will, was presenting about 16 events a month. Now, recognizing that the period that we surveyed was August, 3/4 of the respondents said they'd had at least one. More than half of them had said they had less than 10, but on average, we're starting to see a number that looks like pre-pandemic activity. 92% of folks are hosting full capacity. 82% say they're at a full schedule. A few of them are waiting for the next year. So what's really, really interesting to us is this return to about 18 performances every month at key venues. And as Krista said, we'll be looking at that to see who those venues are, looking at how it's different geographically, regionally, if that's the case, or by presenter type. In terms of risk, we proposed a new set of questions about, have you changed your programming? What kinds of programming are you taking? Are your risks different? And we heard a couple of important things. We heard about how important fundraising grants, especially the Shuttered Venues Operating Grant, is in helping venues reopen. We still hear about COVID-related disruption. Seems that that's more on the artist and program side. And Jesse, I realize I'm talking very fast. I'm going to slow down. Thank you. We heard a lot about increased booking costs and real concern about ticket sales. And I'm going to show you some data about single ticket sales and about subscription sales that indicate to us just how significant a reset we are facing at this time. What are the solutions that folks are sharing with us? We're hearing about fewer, smaller shows. We're hearing a typo here. We're hearing about programming that's targeted to different audiences, which we think is a really positive outcome of changes post-pandemic. But we're also hearing at the other end a lot more sort of market-related decisions, like programs that have a history of performing well or more commercial than mission-based in content. I think when we get to Manuel and Thea, when you guys comment, I'd really love to hear some feedback there. A real interesting phenomena that we see in both the data and in the commentary is about this notion of returning to pre-pandemic levels of activity. This is really interesting to us because it assumes, candidly, like AMS did before the pandemic, that there would be a return to something that we might recognize as normal. What we know now from data that we're collecting together with APAP, through the Audience Outlook Monitor, through any number of other pieces of research being done by our colleagues in the field, is that we're not returning. There is no more normal, or normal is new. That there's a pretty fundamental reset that we're undergoing. In terms of booking for future performances, pretty much everybody, 94%, are booking future performances, and 3/4 of the respondents are booking at similar volumes to their last full season. In fact, 14%, or about 15 in 100, are booking more performances than they were. And we saw some really, really interesting feedback and commentary suggesting the reasons for doing that, the optimism, the new mix of activity, and so on. In terms of subscription sales and single ticket sales, as of August, much like it was in July, just about 70%, 68% of respondents indicated that subscriptions were behind prior years. For most of them, they're behind by just about 35%, so 1 in 3. On the other hand, the data on single ticket sales is more positive, where almost 60% are saying that single ticket sales are looking to be even with or ahead of the prior year. When you take this data and you look at it in the context of other research that we're conducting, we see somewhere plus or minus 80% of prior ticket buyers, pre-pandemic ticket buyers, are already actively attending performances, and about 1 in 2 are buying tickets every month. I think this tells us we've reached a kind of moment in time where we know what part of before we have back. About 8 in 10 of the people we used to know are coming back, are purchasing like they used to. They're shifting perhaps from subscriptions to single ticket sales. We hear that planning is very difficult from audiences. And that really suggests to us the need to sort of recalibrate. So I think what I'd like to do, if it's okay with Manuel and Thea, just pause here for a second on the data and just get your reactions to some of that input. And since we don't have a formal panel, I'm not going to wait all the way to the end.
Sure. I'll jump in just quickly in regards to what you were saying and the feedback you were getting. For single tickets, 100%, I'm hearing that from most of the presenting organizations. And as we see our first tours that have like wrapped from August and through September, a lot of it is a late buy. People are buying their tickets right before the performance. But the interesting conversations I've been having is the subscriptions that are doing the best are the ones that tend to reserve a seat. They don't show up for all the shows, but they get their seat for all the shows they want to go to. So the subscriptions where you have that seat in that venue for every show that you like for the season, that's where I'm seeing people like increase their sales or maintain, versus a subscription that like you're buying the package and you still have to figure out your seat and what have you. It was an interesting dichotomy of the two. And then again, just moving over to ticket sales, even those presenting organizations are saying they're seeing the big push for the last minute buys, which can be difficult if you don't know if that person's showing up tonight who was in a subscription seat, and they may not find out until the end in order to be able to sell it. For sure, sales are down, but I do think that some of our artists that I saw out that are what we would consider mission-based artists, they were doing well because of what was being brought in from the community. So they're selling the shows in a different way, and they're looking for shows that they can actively pull out different partners from the community to help support and sell it, so that it is not a normal model of marketing a show with the lead time, with the expectations of when radio and TV and everything will roll out. So that, you know, again, this is just me with like the last 2 months, so to speak, to see the difference from when we talked about this in the spring and the early summer.
Thanks.
I think one of the things you mentioned was that they were very happy to have the external funding support, particularly of SVOG money. And having served on a state panel evaluating the 12 largest performing arts presenters in that state, what I was seeing was, yes, they all got very large, generous amounts of SVOG money. However, in their future planning, only 10–15% had any plans to undergo any further grant writing or any efforts to raise non-ticket income. And I'm wondering if you have room left in one more of your question sessions to explore that, to see if in fact having benefited from the SVOG money, they might not have any intention to put some effort into trying to secure other support from foundations and corporations. The programming you mentioned, leaning towards a more commercial value, I am seeing that a lot, but it's, I think in addition to the commercial value, I would say that part of what they are looking for is material with a lot of production value, a lot of sizzle, so that it will generate the interest and help sell the tickets. And I'm seeing quite a bit of that.
Thanks, Manuel. And actually, you know, that's a really good question. I mean, we could do a whole set of surveys on how are you paying for it going forward. But I do think in some mechanism, we ought to prompt about what's different on that side of the business. That's a great suggestion. I think that Kim Chan also had a comment out there. Kim, if you can unmute yourself and Willie will let you in on the screen. I think we'd love to hear what you're observing.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can.
Okay, so I work at National Sawdust. We're a music incubator and performance space in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. We're not a large scale proscenium theater. We have a flexible performance space where, depending on the room setup, we have a capacity of anywhere between like 80 and 330 people. So we have never relied on subscription series. So we're fully single ticket venue. We are finding that the artist who, prior to the pandemic, we know we could like sell out at 300 seats, are maybe getting close to like 125. And our no-show rates continue to be in the 20 to 30% range, whereas prior to the pandemic, the no-show rate was closer to like 10 to 12%. And we don't know how to project revenue anymore because of these shifting patterns. We also are trying to, we're basically trying not to make financial commitments until we know we have 70% of the revenue we need to cover an event in hand, which is hard because we can't count on ticket sales, and there's no SVOG, and some of our donors understand it's going to take a few years to dig out of this, and some of them are finding that they're like, well, everyone's reopened now, so you don't need our help at the same scale. But we actually maybe need it at a larger scale because we've also staffed up, and there are expenses we didn't have to have in terms of like larger production crews to have shows, which we didn't have when we were just live streaming. So it's a pretty delicate balance, but we're optimistic. Our board is very supportive. And the new staff members are fantastic. The other audience pattern I would say is that if we have a show that sold a lot of tickets like 2 or 3 months ago, it's a higher no-show rate than if we had a show that sold out within the past 2 weeks.
Great, thanks very much, Kim. You make a couple of really important points. It's not no SVOG, it's no more SVOG, right? We got what we were going to get, which is pretty incredible, actually, in the end of the day. And we certainly need more, and whether it's board or individual or institutional or new partner, going to be really important. I'm going to share some data in just a minute about sales and no-show rates before we move into workforce and excuse me, health safety issues. But Rick Ivey, I know you have something you'd like to add here.
Yeah, I would just report that we are having a little bit different situation down here. I'm in South Georgia in a relatively small community, and we're back to near normal for 22-23. We've had good, very strong season ticket sales, subscriptions. We have very few tickets left for singles, actually. And so, that's a great problem to be in. We are pretty much back to pre-pandemic numbers. We had basically a full season last year, with the exception of one visa-related cancellation of a UK artist that just could not get their visa worked out in time, that had to cancel. But and in that case, last season, we did see a lot of what you're hearing about from other people. We had pretty good sales, not as strong as pre-pandemic, but we had pretty good sales for last season. And our folks just decided on a concert by concert basis, whether or not they'd actually show up for the event, depending on their comfort level at the time. But for this season, we've had very strong sales. We are almost fully booked for 23-24, just one slot left to fill on our main stage series, and we're beginning to talk about 24-25.
Thanks, Rick. And I think, you point up two things that are really, really important to this process. One, that there are very, very significant regional differences over the entire course of the pandemic and at the present. And hopefully you're good news. You're ahead of us. You're ahead of a lot of the rest of the company. You had a full season in the sort of 21-22 season, and that gave you a lot of energy into the 22-23 season. So let me dive back into some data, and then we'll pause again in just a minute for more comments. So in terms of attendance, about 2/3 of respondents are reporting that their houses are between 50 and 74% full. We know that that sort of 70 to 80% level is a magic level economically, in terms of making programs work. 9 in 10 said they're under 75%. So that's a really important takeaway. And on the question of people buying tickets, we're now above 50% that say about the same number or more than used to attend before are coming, but we still have just under 50% of venues reporting to us that drop counts are lower than they were historically. And what we hear anecdotally, as opposed to sort of the 5 to 8 or 10% no-show rate, it's looking like a sort of 15% no-show rate, about double what it was. There's lots of interesting implications about that we can talk about a little bit later. But I think the one that sets our ears up here as consultants is the planning question that Kim was talking about. Like, when do you pull the trigger? When do you make the decision? Because it's as important to sell the tickets as it is, it's as important for people to show up as it is to sell the tickets. Because even if we sell tickets, but the room looks half empty, we have a kind of double-edged sword problem for the artists and how they work and who they're delivering their work to, and to the other audience members who say, hey, did I miss something here? So a really, really interesting problem. And let's ask folks out there and some of our respondents to think about that as I dive into the next set of slides. Now that I've lost the hold of my cursor, about workforce and operations, because this is another really, really important point about whether we're returning or resetting. And again, Kim gave us a hint here, kind of a preview, when she said, we're sort of fully staffed. And in fact, we hear that from about 96% of respondents who say, you know what, our full-time staff is about as big as it was pre-pandemic. And our part-time staff now, this has been a big threshold. We've crossed the 90% threshold of part-timers for the first time since April of 2020. So we are pretty much spending money, certainly the core institutional money, at the rate that we were before the pandemic. But we're hearing about smaller shows, we're hearing about lower attendance, we're hearing about less frequent activity. And that's a pretty straightforward algebra question. Costs are the same, revenues are less. How do we replace them? Becomes a really, really essential problem. We asked a set of questions about the workforce. This is something we're really interested in. About half of folks say looks like what it looked like before. About a quarter say it's younger than it was. We're hearing a lot of people about either new to their job or new to the company, and sort of the intense pressure on onboarding and learning, the loss of institutional history that makes us less efficient or productive. I know those are difficult words in our sector, but words that are very real when it comes to the amount of time we have to get done what we need to get done. And about 1 in 5, 18%, saying we now have a more racially diverse workforce than we did in the past. And just a unvarnished pitch for another APAP AMS project we're working on and have announced a big compensation project that one key component of it is the demographic makeup of the workforce. Look that up on the APAP website, sign up to participate in it if we can. I'm sure, Krista, you'll pitch that a little more at the end, maybe. What are the issues with workforce? They've become more diverse. We have fewer people. It used to be 6 in 10 saying it was about limited workforce supply or interest. That's declined to under 40%. We have a slight increase, a very small increase in the number of folks who are saying it's a problem because people are leaving our sector. But we have some really, really significant changes, right? Greater work-life balance, increased compensation. These are pieces of the sector that we need to think about. So we can talk about that more when we involve some of our other presenters. I just want to wrap up with the usual last part of hard data that we share to you. This is from our Audience Outlook Monitor project in partnership with Wolf Brown. I tell you, if you're worried about this particular virus, the COVID virus, performance is a pretty safe place to be. The vast majority of people attending arts and cultural events are vaccinated in almost every geography of the country. Of the 95% vaccinated, 88% have had their first booster. In our next quarter, we'll be asking about second boosters. What we're seeing is the percent of folks who are saying, I would attend under any circumstance, has had a 20% gain from July until August, of just under half saying masks, no masks, vaccination policies, no vaccination policies. But very, very important for presenters, 54% of respondents, just over half, are saying, I expect there to be something. And this may well be distinct from local policy, but it's personal preference. I take away from the airlines what they're saying these days. It's no longer required to wear a mask, but please feel comfortable if you do. And we know that the people who we can rely on most to return to our performances want to hear us saying that we're looking out for their health and safety. In terms of vaccine requirements, only 1 in 10 saying that's essential to their being present. About half saying, gee, if my venue was doing that, it would make me feel more comfortable. But we do need to remember that we've had this group here, 1 in 10 to 1 in 13, who've said all along, if that's a policy, I'm not coming. And so we have this dichotomy, right? Of we understood what 100% looked like before. Now we have all these other forces that, depending on what we're offering, the terms and conditions of that offer, may be saying, I'm not ready to attend. Another gain here, we think this is pretty much capped out. About 82%, 4 and 5 of traditional historical attendees saying, ticket buyers saying, we're ready to buy, we're ready to come back. About 15% saying, I'm still waiting for infection rates to go down. Unfortunately, we don't have good data on down to what. So just to preempt that question, I don't know the answer. We were asked to ask folks about intermissions in particular. This relates to people congregating, food and beverage service, so on and so forth. Just about 8.5 in 10 of responding venues are again offering intermissions. We know from research that we do with the larger performing arts centers that 100% of them have resumed intermissions, food and beverage service. It's a very, very important part of the presenter's revenue mix, particularly when they're not selling as many tickets as we can. So it's important. In the interest of prompting our next set of questions, just a couple of big observations. So the conversations that we're hearing, how do we rebuild audiences? How do we deal with this budget and economic decision-making that Kim introduced to us against risk? How much risk can we take? How can we manage that risk in the box office or away from the box office? In our artists, agents, and managers call, we're talking a lot about the increasing cost of an artist getting to a venue, the artist at a venue. How do we bear those costs? How do we share those costs? Do they find their way to the ticket? Maybe the 78 to 80% of people who are coming have lots of price elasticity, and the solution is raising ticket prices. Maybe the solution is finding more hotel partners to compass some hotel rooms. I'm not sure, but I think as a field, something really, really important to talk to about. At the same time, we have this set of opportunities and objectives that we're trying to accomplish about diversifying and expanding audiences. figuring out how to deal with a tilt towards single ticket sales. The subscription is not yet dead. There's a part of the world for whom that is the way they plan and the way that they work. So we need to keep that in mind. But how do we deal with this perhaps sort of structural shift for towards ticket sales, single ticket sales? We're hearing a lot about this mission market continuum and what do people want to see, and how do we convince them to come see things that presenters and artists feel it's important to offer. And then finally, what are the tools? How do we manage more effectively? So I'd like to come back to our respondents. We have a couple of questions I've seen in the chat. Krista, if you can help me with those.
Sure.
But Manuel or Thea, anything that you guys want to react to right at the top?
One thing that caught my eye right when you started this segment was that 48% of the presenters were reporting lower numbers in attendance still. And I suppose it's pretty hard even for the presenters to figure it out. And given that you're not undertaking audience surveys, there's probably not an easy way to access this question, but I'm going to posit or guess that individuals are finding ways to occupy their time and entertain themselves somehow. Therefore, if they're not doing it through us, where have they moved away to fill that gap? Because that could be an important question for us to know and understand if we hope to bring them back, and realize what they've gravitated away towards that and found either safer, more satisfying, or more affordable than what we have to offer them.
So Manuel, actually, the good news is we are doing audience research.
Oh.
I'm going to drop a link in the chat for everybody. Again, with our partners at Wolf Brown, the Audience Outlook Monitor, we've been at this now for 28 months. Our September survey actually does reveal some really interesting data. So about 72% of respondents, and these are just about 8,000 or 10,000 respondents every month, different, rotating amongst about 50 venues worth of audiences, are telling us they haven't changed their pattern. They may have changed their frequency, but the range of things they're going to is different. The other 28% is very interesting. We don't have detailed enough data for me to cite to tell you exactly how it breaks up, but we're hearing 4 big themes. One of them is clearly seasonal. It's the summertime. They're going outdoors more. And in some cases, they're going to more outdoors than they used to do. The big music festivals, we just had Sound on Sound here in Connecticut where I live. You couldn't buy a beer. That's the big buzz around here. The beer lines were too long. 35,000 people both Saturday and Sunday. Great acts, incredible show. So outdoors is contributing to some of it right now. And in some geographies, will continue to contribute to that as we move into the fall and winter months. We are hearing that there is more available than ever before online, either from streaming services or from institutions, particularly access to talent in the sort of speaker space that wasn't available before. And it's very interesting and compelling. Some of it is still free. Some of it is included with some streaming service subscription. And some of it people are buying. What a very small percentage of people are buying, less than 8, is paid admission to arts and cultural streaming online, which is a really interesting question for us. The third thing we're hearing is I'm simply going to less because there are other things I'm doing. Over the last 2 years, I've rediscovered it's kind of nice to go for a walk or hang out in the park. And there's a lot more of that, particularly again in the summertime while the weather is good. So I can't unbundle it completely, Manuel, but I think we know two things. I think we know that the people we could count on is most of the people we knew before, but not all of them. And we haven't figured out yet, which is not surprising given how early we are in this reset. We haven't figured out who the replacement folks are. We do see, by the way, very positive signs. Younger people more ready to return. Younger people, and I'm talking anywhere from 25 to 45, ready to explore more things than they have in the past. Not likely to subscribe, very picky on what they attend, struggling a little bit with the ability to plan, because you never know, will the artist be available? Will your friends be able to go out? And so on. But I do think, Manuel, your point is 100% on, right? What can we learn about the people? And I think that's where we need to focus next as an industry, is on the marketplace. And anecdotal, formal research, however we do it, the more we can learn and the more we can share, the better off that we'll be.
And I have just a question on one item you presented. Audiences seem ready to come back for the right content. Did they tell you what they thought the right content was?
No, unfortunately, you know how the question should have been worded after you ask it, right? Basically, what they're saying is that I am not finding content in which I am interested. So this comes from work that the NEA has done, tells us that education, income, and interest are the three key predictors of attendance. So we tend to test those. We'd have to go a layer deeper to say, have your interests changed? What's missing? Is it an availability question? But we do see that now as the sort of number one barrier. And I think what that means to us here is how important it is to be talking to your audiences about, what is it that you want us to do with and for you. Thea, you were going to jump in.
Yeah, sorry, Thaya, just for everyone.
I do it all the time.
It's okay. But I wanted to ask just like the dichotomy, and I didn't write it down, so I'll get the numbers wrong, but it was something about like 87% are back to going to see shows at performing arts centers, but there's the 40-something% of reduce in ticket sales. So I'm trying to see how to make those make sense together, I guess, because that's like a 20% difference, let's say, between the two.
So the first question, and it's actually only 82%, but I wish it was 87, is a simple question of have you attended?
Got it. Okay.
The second question is the frequency question. And I think that's part of it. The third piece of data you're picking up is about drop counts.
Right.
And about 48% of venues are reporting that their drop counts have increased by anywhere from 5 to 8 or 10, decreased, I guess, by anywhere from 5 to 8 or 10%. So people are buying, not necessarily attending at the last minute. Now, unfortunately, what we can't correlate, because we don't ask the question that way, is did you buy the ticket and not go? Right? We don't know how literally that is connected. But it's clear from anecdotal data that the people who are not coming are making that decision at the very last moment.
And I wanted to kind of tie that into what you were also saying in regards to summertime and why people were or were not coming because of weather. My interesting conversations with a number of the Southern buyers and presenting organizations that I work with has been, they actually found that those summers are now so brutal, they cannot present outside. And even their institutional organizations like the orchestras or what have you that have been cannot do it. And so they're switching or thinking and having conversations about switching the model and having the summer be the inside and the fall
Oh, interesting.
be the outside. Because the fall, I mean, I'm in Portland, Oregon right now. It's going to be 85 degrees this weekend. That doesn't happen in the Pacific Northwest. So, you know, there's also, as we look at models and we look at shift of interest and what people are doing, I imagine there's also going to be a bit of a programming shift. Summer festivals for sure in certain places will be the place to go. But if you want to kind of capture that audience into the fall where maybe people don't want to be inside, but you have the weather to sustain it, perhaps that's something that with climate change and with what's happening in the world, we shift to.
Krista, jump in.
Kaya, thank you for underscoring that. I just, I was struck in the whole conversation about how the economic drivers and the situations that are happening are changing our decision making and planning and our planning. And climate change is the second time I've heard it in a week, where places that artists were trying to route tours to are no longer the places that they can route to because they are hotter or the risk for being stranded is going to be greater. And so how do you have to rethink the way that you both program and route and plan your engagements, which I find fascinating. So, you know, and so how do we make our emerging and changing model more sustainable in all the practical ways that, you know, that you're talking about? The other piece that I just wanted to raise up, you know, some of the data talks about these economic drivers in terms of how are they shifting revenue mixes, how are we planning and budgeting for no shows. I'm just curious if anybody on the call has kind of discovered or is experimenting with ways that they are budgeting or planning or having plan B economic decisions that because of all these things, because I think that we're being asked to do that, but I'm not sure how that's manifesting for folks. Does anybody want to comment on that, whether they're on the panel or not? Or did I just ask one of those rhetorical questions?
Yeah, I can say at National Sawdust, if we have a show that is at sellout capacity, which we had this past weekend with a new immersive experiential music piece by Jojo Abbott and Esperanza Spalding with a 30% no-show rate. In that case, what we did was because we're not fixed seating, so we basically created an oversell ticket hold. And so we as we were gauging the no-show rate in real time, we were selling walk-up tickets, right? So which is not something that, you know, a part-time ticket seller knows how to do. And so the box office manager and I are like trying to explain it, and then we just ended up taking over. But that was something that that we've been doing. Sadly, we can't do that at every show.
Well, I think we need predictive analytics like the airlines, right, Kim? So we know what the overbooked number should be. That's not something that we've tested, but in the last two surveys here. But Krista and Willie, let's put that on our list for another time. How have practices changed? Because I'm intrigued as well as if it's appropriate. You know, we're getting this feedback about the cost of doing business broadly. How are presenters and venues responding to that, if I can pose that question?
Can you restate it? I had a brain blip.
Oh, that's okay. So one of the, you know, so we have this set of data that says the economics are changing. We're not selling as many tickets, or as many people aren't coming. We're hearing from the agent, artist, and manager survey that cost of doing business is rising. I'd be interested to know if anybody listening or any of our respondents here would share how they're dealing with that. What are the, we heard, Kim, we heard your approach, right? When we've got something that'll sell, let's oversell. But Thaya or Manuel, any thoughts on how you guys are changing behaviors?
Well, in my case, it's not so much changing, but it was the model I imposed on myself as a presenter. And that was work like mad and raise all the money I could, sell all the tickets I could, and shove it all in the bank. It went into the foundation. And come the end of the season, that was my expendable money for the following season. I knew what I had to spend, and I didn't have any more than whatever I had raised. So, maybe there ought to be some consideration to take, if you have an endowment, set aside your budget for next year and then reset so that everything you sell and all the grant money you raise this year is going into your reserves. And once you're done, you know what you've got available because it's in your account. That's what you're going to spend for next year. No, you won't lose any sleep over it. That's it. You got it.
Manuel, you put your finger on one of the things that I think is most important for our field. And since I have the screen, and I don't think Crystal will disagree, so it's okay. We lost the actual business structure we have when we started referring to ourselves as nonprofits instead of not-for-profits. At the same time, we started to expense budget and then fill the gap, as opposed to saying, look, here's the revenue we can earn, whether it's prior year or reasonable expectation. And we have this giant advantage, right? We have philanthropy as a revenue stream, which the bodega down the street doesn't have. We have this huge opportunity to say, here's the revenue we have. And with that revenue, here's what we could do. And I think that is a behavior change that we're going to see a lot of. More focus on what resources do I actually have available to deliver at the standard I want, with the breadth of activity that my audience wants to see, the participants in my programs want to see. I think that would be a really great behavior change that we might see in the sector.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm just going to agree with Manuel. Absolutely, 100%. I was going to add to that, though, that I find a number of presenters that I speak with, again, because I'm from the agent side, so I speak mostly from that side of the business, but many are speaking about how grants are becoming a thing. They feel like they've done it, they can do it, and they actually are. So it's very regional. I get it, because I know everybody's different in different places. And if you're a really big organization and you weren't able to hire back a grant writer, then perhaps that's just not in the budget and that's not realistic. But on some levels, I'm hearing, well, I've got an intern, and all this intern is going to do now is get grants for us so that we can continue doing this and not have to lean so hard on the One Pop Act or the Broadway or what have you, to kind of fund some of this so we can still do this art moving forward. I would just say quickly from the agent side of view and the manager and the artist, it's really just about, unfortunately, like packing tours and making sure local ground hotels are covered, because the cost of that right now is just extra. It's hugely over budget from anything we've ever had in the past everywhere in the country. There's no place that is not like safe from that. So those are the two things I would add.
I think I added a really good point, because in Oregon, I think they've set an example for the rest of the country about making resources available. And we do know, by the way, broadly, that there's CARES Act money sitting in states all across the United States. And some of them are looking for ways that meet the legislation to spend it. And one of those happens to be support for the arts and culture sector. So folks could go online, see all the great things that Oregon did with those resources, and maybe find some ideas. Krista, we're right at the top of the hour. So kick it back to you to wrap us up. But as always, before I do, Anna, Jesse, thank you so much for being part of this, making sure that anybody who wants to participate has access. For anybody that was here, please share the link with others. And I know, Krista, you'll remind everybody about all the other opportunities they have to participate.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And Stephen, a couple people were asking if the slides would be available. Can we make those available?
Of course we can. And
Okay.
I think we have in the past, but
Yeah,
we
I'm
should.
pretty sure we have. So,
And certainly as we get the report synthesized, we will make that available to folks who have participated as well as others.
thank you so much. Well, I want to thank Stephen and the team at AMS Planning and Research for their amazing work. I want to do a special shout out for Thaya and Manuel and Kim and Rick. Thank you so much for commenting and sharing your perspectives with your colleagues and raising up some issues that, you know, really needed to be teased out. So really appreciate that. I want to underscore the fact that we've just launched an APAP compensation project, which is we're super excited about. And for those that have been in the field for a while, it's getting back to doing that salary survey that we used to actually do. So excited about that. But some people have raised the question, why does the project just focus on presenters and not include artists, agents, and managers at this time? So I want to take the opportunity to just share that because this first cohort is a pilot, we need to focus on a limited group of organizations with similar organizational structures and position types to strengthen our comparative model. So we're starting with presenting organizations, but our plans do not end there. Our plan is to share this information at conference and then to expand this compensation project model beyond the presenter organization cohort to agents, managers, and agency organizations. And we are currently looking for individuals who want to be advisors on helping us frame that in that next phase, because it's a very different kind of structure and we need to make sure we get it right. So just wanted to let you know about that. And if you are a presenter and you are interested in being in this pilot cohort, please go to the link that we've put in our email I think yesterday. We have a reminder going out today. So we look forward to that, and we're looking forward to sharing that data with you. In the meantime, we hope you have a great rest of the day. Cam, you have a question?
Sorry, will that survey also distinguish between salaries at for-profit presenters versus nonprofit presenters?
Yes, and it will also include some demographic data. So we're also looking at trying to get a read and a bead on who we are and where we need to make some changes. So with that, thanks for asking that question, Kim. With that, we hope you have a great rest of the day. I think there's a survey coming your way, yet another one about this, about today's event, and we'll be in touch. And we look forward to seeing you the next time. Take care. Thank you, Willie, for all your help and support of this event today as well.
My pleasure.